Hey y'all, it's Lindsay. I wanted to make a video this week for you talking about just sort of my adventure in health and where I am right now, where my focus lies right now, or where it lay. Not sure on the grammar for that one. But I struggled so hard with words, and I decided that the more opportunities I had to go back and press record over and over again, the more frustrated I was getting with myself. So instead, I decided to come live and talk about it this way so that there's no start and stop and repeating myself and all that jazz. So, hello, if you are new here, my name is Lindsay. I follow a ketovore-ish way of life, which I classify as a high protein, moderate to high fat, and low carb way of eating. This is a lifestyle for me, and I genuinely love it. So there's that. I did not start out in this place, and I wanted to talk for a few minutes sort of about just like the progression of my adventure in health. And it started, gosh, I don't even know when, but I believe we were living in Arizona on an Indian reservation, a Navajo reservation, and I could not get access to Greek yogurt without a tremendous cost. And I was on a liquid diet or a soft foods diet at that point. I had TMJ pretty badly. I had to get cortisone shots in my jaw. The inflammation between my two mandibles was really intense. They had me on some various anti-inflammatories and all that jazz, but my TMJ specialist, doctor, he told me I had a couple of choices to really help heal my jaw more quickly. One was to stop talking, which for me, that would have not been doable at all. I mean, still to this day, I cannot stop talking. Or my second option was to go on a liquid soft foods diet in order to give my jaw time to rest. I also was given some splints for my mouth, a daytime splint and a nighttime splint. And the only time that I could take them out was to consume food that was not water, or to like brush my teeth. Beyond that, they stayed in. And it was what was necessary at the time. And during that period of time, I made a ton of smoothies, found that the cost of Greek yogurt, which was a fantastic protein source for me at the time, was really expensive. I figured out how to make it for myself. Gosh, this must have been, it was 2011, 2012, mid 2012. So I started doing that for myself. And I've always been one to reverse engineer things or to figure out how to do things for myself rather than figure out make more money to pay for the more expensive things. I've always rather, I'm much more of a DIYer or a reverse engineer in that respect. So all of that to say, the Greek yogurt was sort of the foray into doing everything for myself and researching things for myself. And then we moved from the res up to Wyoming. And in Wyoming, I met some friends who were very intrigued by the whole Weston A. Price Foundation and how that worked. And it was in Wyoming that I started grinding my own wheat berries. I would actually sprout them, and then I would dry them out completely, and then I would grind them into wheat or into flour. And I was very rudimentary at that point in my life. Mason jars with some mesh and big flat cookie sheets with paper towels. And I did not have a dehydrator. I didn't have like all of the equipment. The only thing I had for a blender, I don't think we had the one we have now. I've replaced it since then. But we did have a decently powered blender, but not like to the point where I could get a super fine flour. I had a friend who had a Vitamix. It was like an old Vitamix, but she let me borrow it so I could grind my wheat berries into flour. And during that phase of my life, I was very concerned with phytates and phytic acid. I was soaking all grains that I was eating. I was very intentional with that because I was pregnant with my second child, and I started to notice my body, my teeth were in a lot more pain than they had ever been before. Started researching all of that. Weston A. Price, soaking grains, slow food, all that jazz. I also tested out sourdough. I tested out kombucha. I tested out milk kefir or kefir, regardless of, how you want to say that, that's the same. I made my own ginger bug. I did a lot of these things. My husband bought me a grain mill for one of my birthdays, and I practiced the art of grinding our own wheat from then on out. I tested out dozens of recipes, just trying all the things with all the fresh milled flour, soaking the fresh milled flour, doing the soaked wheat berries, and then sprouting them, grinding them after the fact. I did it all. And I got really decent at doing those things. And then we lived in Utah where I did these things. We moved up to Alaska while I was doing these things. And then we moved out to Wisconsin. And in between Alaska and Wisconsin, there was probably a 2.5 month period where a lot of our things were packed away. We were living in a sort of like a Vrbo. It wasn't actually called Vrbo back then or Airbnb back then, but it was a weekly lake house you could rent, and it was in the off season, so we were allowed to rent it for longer. And it was fully furnished, so I didn't have the need to unpack much more than, a couple of suitcases worth of clothing. So I didn't have access to all my things, and it was a new area, so we just kind of fell into the habit of eating the junk foods, like plain white flour from the store, and pre-made foods or prepackaged foods or processed boxed foods and things like that, whatever it was that was easy for us to manage while we were in the process of house hunting back then. That was, oh my goodness, we bought that house in 2015, 2016, end of 15. So it's been a long time since all of that mess. And during that time in 2016, January, I realized that all of my clothes were super snug. I felt just super inflamed. My jaw was not doing well. My inflammation had gone down back in 2012, 2013 timeframe when I was more intentional with how I was treating my body health-wise. And because we kind of reverted back to a lot of those highly processed foods when we left Alaska, my inflammation just seemed to be there a lot. And for a long time, the inflammation presented as if it was like a really bad ear infection, and it was both sides. Excuse me. So January 2016, I watched a video of the Trim Healthy Mamas at some church conference talking about their health experience. Now, their experience was somewhat different than mine. I never went vegan. I never went vegetarian. I always believed that meat was good and animal products were good. And I still stand there today, hence me being a ketovore. So yeah, distracted. I started watching them. I learned their process, or learned what they were all about. I presented it to my husband, and my husband, knowing that I am a starter and not a finisher, decided to challenge me. Well, don't spend money on this thing. If you can figure it out for yourself, then go for it. But, we're not spending money on something that you're not likely to follow through on. And I said, I shall show you. So I got onto the THM bandwagon back in 2016, did that, realized after a short period of time that really what I was doing was not Trim Healthy Mama so much as it was keto. So I went keto for the remainder of that year. I think I went keto it may have been mid-February that I did keto. From that point forward, I was keto. We got pregnant in 2017, so that sort of derailed my health journey. I noticed my teeth were more sensitive, my inflammation was more prevalent, but I think that my pregnancy in 2017 was probably my most healthy pregnancy out of all three of them. So once number 3 was born, went through, got back on Trim Healthy Mama thinking that I needed all of those carbs for milk production. And really I was doing high protein, well, high-ish protein. I was allowing the fats, and I was allowing healthier carbs that didn't seem to cause me the same kind of inflammation as processed grains, processed breads and things like that. So went that route. And then once my youngest was weaned, I went back to keto. And I've pretty much stuck it there the entire time since. But back whenever I was first starting to dig into health and wellness, I noticed things like magnesium is vitally important to the human body. So I was taking magnesium. I noticed like all of these various things, like vitamin D was very important, but vitamin D by itself is not good. You need to have K2. And I was doing a lot of different things, pairing up different vitamins and supplements to make sure that I was getting those things that I really needed. And with every book that I would read, everything that I would discover, I would just sort of start adding one piece on top of another, substituting out other things that I felt like, okay, that's not really applicable to me. You know, take the meat, spit out the bones was my theory. And I was always progressing, always learning something new. Well, the most recent thing that has been on my radar for about the past 3-ish months has been iodine. And if you are part of this keto, low carb, ketovore, carnivore world, you may have been inundated with different information about this. I think Dr. Barry did a video, maybe it was, I don't know how long ago, maybe it was a year ago. I struggle to remember, but the thing that really kickstarted or really put me into more of a mindset of let me investigate iodine more was back whenever Wendy from Loving It on Keto talked about adding iodine to her water. You know, they make their morning elixir and I love watching them every morning. I may not be able to comment on them all the time, but I'm almost always up to date on Loving It on Keto's videos. But she would always put her iodine in there. She would always do her various ingredients in her morning elixir. And the iodine piece, I had always kind of written it off. There have been history of thyroid issues in my family on the hyperactive thyroid side, and iodine is a hard pass whenever those are your issues. They were never mine though, but I kind of assimilated that information like iodine bad because of the history within some of my family members. So I never really investigated it further, but then I started realizing, well, I don't have a thyroid problem at this point in my life, praise God. So why would I not consider what iodine can do for us? So I started looking into it a little bit, but never really acted on it. And then recently, Amy over at Carnivore's Angel did a live talk, a live stream here on the YouTubes, and she was talking about the book, The Iodine Crisis. And I was like, I'm gonna go read that sample of a book. The book is almost 10 years old at this point. And I guess it's nine years old this year. And I was like, I need to research this. And when I read things in that sample, like the sample gave me a lot of information and I was like, I really need this book. So it talked about breast cancer. That has always been kind of one of those things that kind of nags the back of my brain, just because the more tissue you have, the more opportunity there is for cancer to develop in your breasts. And, you know, like there are various things you can do, like nursing and those kinds of things that can prevent it or can aid in reducing your risk. But as soon as I read that sample and the author, what was her name? Hold the phone, literally. Lynn Farrow, I've got it up right here. When she started researching it because she developed breast cancer, I was like, iodine for breast cancer? What? What? So, hi, Lissa. So I started looking through this, and they were also talking about how your brain fog could be managed by introducing iodine into your diet. Your like your extremities being cold, like super cold extremities, hands, feet, that kind of thing, can be aided with iodine, like 100,000 different things. Not literally, that's not literal, but so many factors in the human body require the iodine, and in every human cell there is an iodine receptor. And another piece that Amy had mentioned on her live stream was the fact that the insulin, like it was related, that it could potentially be related to insulin and insulin resistance, our iodine receptors. And that's kind of one of the number one reasons why I love being a low carb, ketovore, keto follower, is that I'm really intentionally trying to mitigate any risk of diabetes type 2. One of my grandfathers, he did develop diabetes type 2. He was a thin man. And so it's one of those factors where I'm like, I don't want to develop insulin resistance on any level whatsoever. And I'm trying to do all I can to mitigate that. If iodine is a cofactor for preventing that, or if it's an element that you need in order to prevent those kinds of things, I am all here for it. I know we struggled to get pregnant with our first and with our second children. And if I would have known that iodine was potentially an aid in a PCOS or other female, cycle problems, I would have researched it sooner. All of these pieces, and our health is kind of like an adventure. Everybody talks about it being a journey. I can't stand the word journey. It just feels so overused to me. So use the word journey if you like. And I know I misstep often and say journey instead, just because it's what you always hear. My health journey, my health journey. I used to always say it was a quest, because I feel like you're always like, you don't know what the next step is, and you still keep pushing forward. You still keep hunting for the next checkpoint on your health. And so my health quest, my health adventure, this is where I am now. And I'm sure there are millions of people who were already like, oh yeah, iodine train, totally already got that in the bag. And they've been doing that for so long. But for me, this has sort of been slowly coming on, as far as, just digging into the research on it. And yeah, so that's where I'm sitting right now. It used to be all about the magnesium and D3 and K2 and all of those other things. So it's something you never even think about, Lissa. Yeah, it's and we've been told for so long that iodine is bad. It is not good for us. Yet there's a lot of information that has been either stifled or has been misrepresented or ignored, and it is it's one of the periodic elements on the periodic table. It's an element. And it's one of those pieces of the puzzle that our bodies require. So I am fascinatingly captivated by the Iodine Crisis from, what was her name again? Dagnabbit, Lynn Farrow. And it's all anecdotal for her specifically. Like, she's been an investigative researcher and writer in writing her book. So she is not a medical professional. This is not her field of study specifically. But I have found her story and the information she has shared thus far has been fascinating, and I'm eating it all up with a spoon. Okay, Lissa, you don't think you've ever heard it's bad just when you only think the label on salt saying this doesn't contain iodine, an essential nutrient. Interesting. Yeah, I don't buy iodized salt. I've never been one to do that. Ever since, back when we lived in Utah, we've lived a lot of places, right? So in Utah, we lived in Lehi, and which is a suburb, sort of a few suburbs south of Salt Lake City proper, and the Salt Lake. And when we were, we could go shopping around there and go into a grocery store and we could buy Redmond real salt. So we would buy that because I was like, oh, it's local, cool. I love that idea. And then once we had moved to, after a couple of moves, we moved out to the Wisconsin, and I couldn't find it on the shelves anymore. And it kind of fell off my radar because Trim Healthy Mama really pushes hard pink Himalayan salt. And so I had not really purchased an iodized salt up until, past that point. So that was what, 2014. The only reason why we would ever buy any of like those canisters, those paper canisters of salt, like Morton's or the Great Value brand of that, was for science experiments, for salt painting, that kind of stuff. So it was never really for consumption at that point. Oh, really? Oh, that's cool. Or that one is closer to the north of Salt Lake, if I'm remembering right. Is that true or false, Lissa? I'm struggling to remember. There were so many little tiny suburbs. That's the right word for it. We were just south of Draper. Draper is where the IKEA was. And back in those days, IKEA did free lunch Tuesdays for children. So if you bought an adult meal, you were able to get free lunch for your children. And it didn't matter how many kids you had. There was not one of those like 1-to-1 ratio deals. So I could go with my two girls at the time, because there were only 2 of them then, and I could buy 1 meal for myself and get 2 kid meals for them for free. Loved playing that game. Okay, Alyssa said something else. Okay, so it's been a long time since you were actually able to talk to those people. But still, Utah is a gorgeous state. We were only there for a short period of time and not even for a winter. I was really saddened by that because I wanted to do all the skiing, you know. They had the Winter Olympics there in Salt Lake. We actually had driven up through where the complex was for the Olympics, and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool to come skiing here? But by that time, we had already moved up to Alaska. So we were kind of just sort of there, like, you know, just blowing on through. Utah is just so pretty, Lissa. Those sunrises over top of the mountains are amazing. So anyway, I wanted to just really kind of let y'all know the Iodine Crisis is the book that I'm currently reading as far as my adventure, my quest for better understanding what I can do to support the health and wellness of my body. And yeah, I'm kind of excited about it. I don't know enough about it to speak any more intelligently on it than I currently have. I don't even know if that qualifies as being intelligent to this moment, but there we are. And I've been going on for quite some time now. Also, I wanted to point out back here, we rescued a couple plants, me and my middle daughter. We, over in the garden center of our Walmart, they had some indoor plants that were all clearanced out. And so I'm just loving the way they look back there. Was able to rescue a majestic palm and a fiddle leaf fig. They were both fairly dried out. So I had to turn off the humidifier back there. I'm trying to keep them and revive them. And my middle, she also rescued a mini orchid that is adorable. And I kind of want to go back and rescue more of them. My husband said, did you get them for free? Because you can't call them rescues if you didn't get them for free. And I was like, no, I guess technically we did not get them for free. We paid half price and that felt great. So anyway, I'm sorry, that just caught my eye back there. And then I've got my snake plant back there trying so hard. It doesn't grow straight up and down. So I don't know what variety that one is, but wow. You're welcome for that tangent. All right, I think I am going to wrap that up here. If you are watching the replay, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for those of you who have been here live with me. I really appreciate that. I would love to know what kind of information you are learning. How are you educating yourself further to sort of propel your health to the next level, forward, all that stuff. So let me know in the comments down below, and I